Okay. Well, what did you learn about the high holy days you didn't know?
Keeping the squeezes and sacred laws.
No, you just had a course on the high holy days, didn't you? Okay, so what did you learn? New. New.
The origin of some of the prayers.
The origin of the prayers?
I think the thing that I found most interesting was the fact that Rabbi and said he was so open about his points of view, that all of the major machzorim are the same. That only the English is sometimes,
Yeah, the English is poetic.
but yeah, but we know.
And sometimes I miss the Victorian English.
But we don't have,
You know, in the
we don't have the
UPB.
repetition of
No, but it's all.
But
There's a lot of
I'm only going to talk about 3 of the holidays and festivals, so hopefully I'll get through them all. I'm skipping Hanukkah. Yeah, why?
Not a festival, not the Torah,
Not a holiday.
an American.
It's an artificial invention of American Jews to compete with Christmas.
They didn't celebrate that in Europe in the 19th century, Hanukkah. I mean, even to.
Yeah, but not with gifts.
No.
It's 8 days of gifts, you
We're
know.
gonna have Thanksgiving.
What?
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, yeah. That's this year. But other than that, I really don't think there is any religious significance. If we look at the origins of Hanukkah, we're looking at a very right-wing group called the Maccabees, who decided that, you know, I'm sure with every action there's a reaction. And when the Hellenists really tried to bring in the Greek idols and all the Greek customs and ceremonies, the Olympiad, which were bloody at that time, the Jews rebelled. The story of the pig is not verified. And Hanukkah is not found in the Bible. Why?
After the codification, one reason.
Well, the codification went on,
Yeah, I know that.
you know,
I
about
think
200-300.
Not in there because there's nothing Godish about it.
Oh, yeah, well, you know, Mattathias supposedly said, you know, he killed the guy because he, as a guy who was going to sacrifice a pig, primarily, and what were pigs doing in Israel in the first place? Think about that. You know, pork is forbidden, who's raising pigs? Now, you can get a white beef sandwich in Tel Aviv, and white beef is ham in Tel Aviv. Now they're raising pigs, but there's nothing in the Bible, primarily because the rabbis thought that the story of Hanukkah was too violent. And violent stories about Jews against Jews was not permissible, which will bring me to an interesting point when I get to the temple cult, okay? And what was going on during that period of time. So really, the 3 holidays, the 3 festivals are, come on, Sukkot, what? Passover, and Shavuot. Right. And what are they all connected to?
Bringing sacrifices.
That was added later.
Harvest?
They're all
Really? Yeah, that's it. Harvest.
agriculture.
Yeah, they're all related to land possessions. They're all related related to the idea that, okay, when you go out to harvest your field, and you have a lot of field, you know, depending on where you lived, in the negative, of course, you didn't. But depending on where you lived, you had large fields, something like these commercial farm fields now. How'd you live out there?
A little hut.
You built a hut, a temporary shelter to protect you from whatever winds, rains, inclement weather there might be. And so therefore, they built little huts in which they lived while the harvest went on. And the harvest went on for, how long is Sukkot? No, 7 days. Absolutely. There's some thought that Sukkot had a Canaanite beginning, in that this is the way they functioned. They would go out to the field, they would harvest in huts, they'd all stay in these huts, and they'd eat whatever they had provisioned, and they would come back after the 7 days of harvest, the week of harvest. And at that time, among the Canaanites, there was no Sabbath, so they worked 7 days a week. Now, the Sabbath came in later with the Israelites. The Israelites, we are what is the term? An adoptive religion. We pick and choose from those customs, except Hanukkah, those customs which are prevalent before we were there. Before we were there. A friend of mine recently wrote an article about the deteriorating numbers of Jews in the United States. And he based that on what? What? Interfaith marriages. Yeah, all marriages are intermarriages, right? Okay, I mean, you know, you got a man and a woman who are two different personalities and two different backgrounds and all kinds of baggage, and they try and learn to live together. Yes,
I
Paul?
heard that last night about, from APAC.
What?
One of the representatives, APAC representatives last night said they're anxious for numbers of Jews to come to the APAC conference to show the Arab press of our strength, because our strength has diminished.
Yeah, but AIPAC's a little right-wing too. You know, everything Israel does is right, everything anybody else does is wrong. What comments did they make about the United States supporting Israel? Any?
Oh, that we were very supportive.
Yeah, we are very supportive. Obama's the best of all. But, you know, with the way our government is behaving, for a political point of view, nobody can count on us.
Well, the point they were making yesterday, I spoke to one of the representatives, they said there are less Jews in the United States. In the 40s, we were 3% of the population. We're now down to about 1.7.
Right.
Part of that is from interfaith marriage. And the other part also you have to consider, there are a lot of Jews who don't practice Judaism.
That's right. I know a lot of Jews who don't practice.
And we're having less children.
But,
And Jews are having less children.
yeah, but
Except
the Orthodox are making up
Yeah,
for that.
but they got.
Like 10, 11, 12 kids. And some of those will practice and some of those will disappear. You know, the old saying used to be, have 3 children. Why?
One to
One?
replace it, the third one to replace it.
No, this was the saying before the holiday.
Oh, and next month.
Okay. Okay, one to,
One to add to the population, to the numbers.
well, one to, you know, to progenitate you. one to go into society at large and maybe be lost, and another to have a family. So the idea was 2 boys and a girl. You know, if you had 3 girls, you probably would have a better chance of having all Jewish families.
Yeah.
Because the girls are probably the ones who perpetuate the religion. I know that I did an interfaith marriage, which I do all the time, because somebody's got to do them, and they're going to get married, and there's nothing you can do about that, and you're not going to dissuade them. Great story about my son, Michael. Michael, when we moved to California, got a girlfriend whose father was a captain in the CHP, California Highway Patrol, and rabid anti-Semite. That last name was fun, right? Okay. He went with her for 8 years, and we are holding our breath. I mean, we really were holding our breath. All through high school and much of college, until she became a liberated woman. And he couldn't handle that. My son, Michael. I don't know anybody more liberated than Patty.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, right, okay. And he broke up with her. Yeah, amazingly, he broke up with her. Or she broke up with him, we never got the full story. And about 1.5 years later, he started running because it was very heavy, which he still is. He started running, and there was another person running, and he decided he's going to catch up and talk to the other person running. Turned out to be Patty, and of course he called and said, I met the girl I'm going to marry. And we said, what's her name? Especially after the 8-year romance that he had. And he said, Patty. First question out of my mouth was, what's her last name? He wouldn't tell us. He would not tell us. Okay? Then we found out. Okay.
So what was it?
Rosenwald. Okay, Rosenwald. She rarely does that because, you know, she's related to Julius and that whole client of Sears. But I found a lot from her grandmother about the Rosenwald family. Anyhow, the whole thing is that we are in interfaith marriages. If the boy is Jewish, it's iffy. You know, I said to the bride a couple of weeks ago, I said, when do you have kids? And she said, without interrupting me, she said, they'll be Jewish. Jewish bride. The kid, the boy she married is an avid Catholic. So you pretty well can count. You pretty well, and most of my interfaith marriages are between Catholic and Jews. Why do you think that is?
They last?
Huh?
They last, these marriages?
Some.
There's
Some.
There's
I don't keep a tally on that.
Plus there's religion in the family.
Their religion is family. Their religion is structured. They have deep beliefs, and they share those beliefs. And social Catholicism is very similar to social Judaism. I mean, insofar as justice and fairness is concerned. So, it's interesting. The values are different. The ones that don't last are generally Jews and Protestants. Because the Protestants go little to the right, a lot to the right, and all of a sudden, you know, it's all Jesus. And of course, that's never mentioned in my ceremonies. Anyhow, the possession of the land is the origin of Sukkot. And families would come and make sacrifices. Why sacrifices? What were the purpose of sacrifices?
To replace the sacrifices of.
What?
To replace the sacrifices of children that were always done in that area.
To replace what?
Sacrificing children or women.
You mean the sacrifices of the temple, right? Well, I think they did the sacrifices to show they were grateful that the crops were
You
good.
got it.
And,
You got it. Okay, that became corrupted later on. And I'll tell you all about that later on. If you haven't read a good book lately, and if you're interested in biblical times, read Aslan's Jesus, the Zealot, Jesus of Nazareth. It's very informative, unless you can wade through Josephus, which is equally informative. Yeah, I know, Josephus was considered a traitor and everything. He was what's called a interstitial Jew, okay, and a really peripheral Jew. Peripheral to the society in which he lived.
Isn't it?
Both.
You're both said.
Yeah, he was denounced by Jews, and he was denounced by the Romans. So, you know, he lived a precarious life. So the pilgrims would go where? Before. For 300 years before they would go to Jerusalem, before Solomon built the temple, actually, they go to Shiloh. Are you familiar with Shiloh? It's in the West Bank. Shiloh is some miles north of Jerusalem. It was an ancient altar, probably Canaanitic in origin, and it became the capital of Israel during the Davidic times until David united Jerusalem, which was a city called prior to Jerusalem, Shalom, or City of Peace. They would go to Shiloh for about 300 years. Who wrote the song, something about Shiloh? Was it the Jewish kid Dylan? Or Springsteen, another one? Huh? I don't know. It was celebrated as Shiloh because Shiloh was designated as the only sanctuary. So what we began to have is a center for worship. Something like BJBE is to us. It's a center for worship. You can worship anywhere.
Neil Diamond.
Neil Diamond, thank you, looked it up. Another Jew. Okay, going back to pre-Jerusalem history. You know, but Neil Diamond was Emeritus. Yeah, watch.
One of his band of singers.
You'll find it, everything's on the iPhone. You know, you can find anything on the net. As far as the date of Sukkot, we don't have a date for Sukkot, unlike today, until the book of Deuteronomy. When we get to the book of Deuteronomy, which is a very late book, the title Deuteronomy means what?
second
Huh?
telling, or recapitulation.
First of all, the book is very involved with social justice, the book of Deuteronomy, and reflects prophetic thought. because all the named prophets, like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, lived before the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy came in the Josiah Reformation, about 560, after the Babylonian exile. And it came around them when they rewrote much of the Torah. Because Josiah, who is considered a good king, there were very few good kings in ancient Israel, Josiah was a reformer. He wanted everybody to be cared for. And he was considered a good king. In Deuteronomy, the name was changed from Sukkot, or whatever the previous name was, to the Feast of Tabernacles, which is, what the early Reform used to call it, the Feast of Tabernacles. We rarely use Jewish names except Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Pesach was Passover. Shavuot was the giving of the law. We broke away from all of that. In Exodus, prior to Deuteronomy, probably years before Deuteronomy, it basically says after you gather the first fruits of your threshing, the first threshing, the summer harvest, you'll gather around the threshing floor and the wine presses. Wine has always been an integral part of Jewish celebration. It really is. The celebration took it from there. In fact, Plutarch, the Greek writer, called it akin to the Dionysian rites. You know what the Dionysian rites were? What?
Well, first of all, it was based on an extremely important ingestion of wine until you couldn't see anymore.
That's right.
And then sometimes it evolved into a bacchanalia, depending
Right,
on how
it
you
was
grew it.
exactly, it was a bacchanalia. Yeah, the Dionysian rites is the precursor to Christmas. Sukkot is a precursor to what? Of American holidays.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Exactly. Okay. The celebration is to be taking place at a ordained, divinely appointed sanctuary, which originally was Shiloh and then became Jerusalem during the Davidic days and the building of the Solomon's Temple. And it was, contrary to what most people say, a humanistic holiday. It's all about gratitude. And being humanistic, what are you supposed to do on Sukkot?
Well, boots,
Right, what else?
welcome the stranger.
Easy. You're supposed to welcome the stranger and the homeless. It's all part of the Josiah Reformation. King Josiah, you can look him up on Google. You're supposed to welcome in those who don't have anything. In fact, we're very explicit about those who are less fortunate. What's the purpose of the tzitzus on a tallis?
Remind us of the.
Of what?
Of the mitzvah.
The 600
Commandments.
Well, that's a later interpretation. Okay, what's the original interpretation? Anybody know?
You're commanded to wear a fringed garment.
Oh, incoming of the, in gathering, because you take the 4 points, in gathering of the Jews.
That's good.
That's new.
That's good, I haven't heard that one.
That's new. That's in our Shabbat morning service.
That's your bottom
And
line?
we do that.
Oh, I see, okay, that's a new one.
Yeah, it is. a new one.
That is really a good, I love our inventive minds, I really do. 2 out of the 3 who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine.
Yeah.
Yes.
2 days, 3
That's
Jews.
right.
It's up to these three Jews.
I thought
what?
they all-
I looked it up immediately.
All the names
As
sounded
soon as the
Jewish.
first name came up, looked it up immediately.
And
No, you didn't.
2 out of 3,
Three, yes.
The last one wasn't Jewish, was.
Satkov, was Satkov.
Yeah.
And there's a Frenchie who made Aliyah, so he's Israeli. Yesterday, there were two for medicine.
Yeah.
Today, the physicist who runs it was for the God particle. One of them,
Yeah.
and one of them has a French name, but I
Yeah,
opened
right.
up my
Oh, you looked
Jerusalem
him up?
Post, and no, I didn't have to. Right online, Jerusalem Post, Israeli Lens shares the Nobel.
And it's still Jewish, it could be French.
No
Today, it's
kidding.
3 Jews.
So he's an Israeli.
Yeah,
For what was that one for, Sam?
physics.
Physics.
Francois something.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's still Jewish.
yeah, probably so.
20% of the Nobel Prizes are awarded.
Yeah, right. Okay,
So you skipped one thing. What does the word Deuteronomy really mean?
5th book. 5th book. Okay.
Not disappointed.
You're disappointed, you thought it had some, yeah, you thought, well, there are 4 other books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then under the Josiah Reformation, it was written. The outlines of the others, the Bible wasn't codified until we got into the AD period of time. It took, God, must have taken 800 years to codify the Bible. A lot of it you can trace back to the early days, and Deuteronomy you can trace to the later days where the prophets were, traveling the land and preaching all sorts of, doom and gloom and joy and reformation and resurrection and all their promises. All right, you're supposed to bring the first fruits to Jerusalem. And again, there was no time, but it's the most action-packed of all the holidays. You have to do more. Here, for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, what do? Other than fast.
Reflect.
Huh?
Reflect.
Look inside.
Yeah, but that's a mental exercise.
Right, it's not something like.
It's not,
Right.
active. It's a holiday to eat a lot and sit a lot
And think about
and think a lot, okay? You're supposed to think while you're sitting. Okay. But it's primarily, when you look at it, family traditions. The Erev Rosh Hashanah dinner is a big event. And the breakfast is a big event. And what happens then? Families get together and they celebrate together. But on Sukkot, probably families did the same thing, as well as strangers. The strangers. The 4 tzitzis represent the 4 corners of your field. That was the early interpretation. To remind you that the 4 corners of your fields are to lay ungleaned, unharvested, and who are they for? The poor, the homeless. The poor and the homeless. So even in those days, the Israelites had a very social agenda. Very social agenda. You're to take care of the poor and the homeless and the orphan in your midst, which was what the prophets preached all the time. This being, in my opinion, one of the signal prophets whose message was primarily social justice. Okay? Now, there are other things we do on Sukkot. What is it?
Lulav.
Okay, the lulav. All right. And what are we supposed to do with that? Shake the lulav. Right. We're supposed. What's a lulav composed of?
Palm leaves.
Huh?
Palm leaves.
What?
Palm leaves.
A palm leaf, what else?
Myrtle,
Myrtle,
etrog,
which is called the hadassah. The etrog, which is not, no, that's separate. That's separate, you hold that in the other hand.
you combine it.
Yeah, you do actually. And what else? What else? One other leaf or leaves.
One is one is for the eye and one is for the mouth.
Those are the
Willow.
Willow, right,
Hopefully,
Right.
something else.
you're lost.
I'm amazed at how
She's good. She's extremely good. So, they're composed of those, and the palm leaf generally is what you hold when you hold the hula. And they're bound together. Now, what we do is we go to Monaco, or if some of you remember, the old place Rosenblum's, which is on, no! Rosenblum's is now on Grosse Pointe Road.
Church and Grosse Pointe.
Yeah, that's right, Skokie. Yeah, I tend to forget. And you hold them together, and how often do you shake them?
4 times.
Huh?
4 up and down to the side.
Yeah, but that indicates the four corners of the earth.
And around.
And sky and ground,
3
air.
times each way.
What?
3 times each way.
Yeah. Okay, but how many times daily?
Probably 3.
Huh?
Probably 3.
Actually, you wave them 7 in all directions, up, down, 7. 7 being what I call a magic number. 7 days of creation. Okay? The patriarchs, matriarchs, how many were there? 7. All right. And when you do that, by the way, the etrog really early on represented the perfect Jew. And I'll explain that to you in a minute, okay?
Well, actually, it doesn't specifically say intro. You took an act to mean intro, but it
Yeah, but-
does not specifically say it.
Yeah, but ritual Jews have to find an etrog that is perfect.
Right.
And they go shopping for that. Big market for that. Okay, and for the hunt. You're supposed to go out and gather those yourself.
Well, you do, you go to the store and you gather it up and you.
Not quite the same thing. You're supposed to go out to the fields and gather them yourself. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about dependency. Dependency and ego. And what happens is when we're filled with ego, we lose a sense of dependency on everything and everyone about us. Sukkot is a great holiday to realize your dependence on the sun, on the rain, on the earth, on the wind, on, when you point it in all directions, everyone around you. I mean, who supplies our food?
God.
Well, farmers.
The ultimate, right.
Farmers.
What?
Farmers.
Farmers. Okay, you buy the food at the farmers. How many of you belong to that organic farm that the temple is involved with?
Well, most of it, I believe it's wonderful, and I would do it if I had more than 2 people in my
Right.
home,
Right.
one of whom doesn't eat vegetables. So, and I
I'm
think
not
that's
a
why
vegetable lover
it's sort of generational. If you,
Yeah, I think
you know,
so.
if you have a family in your house.
I don't support it,
Mhm.
okay, because there are only 2 of us, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, they come in bulk. You know, it's like going to Costco. Now, I was expecting somebody to say the grocery store. supplies our food. Whether it be Dominic's or Jules or Mariano's or in some other place. I don't have the slightest idea where Mariano's is. But when you go through the layers of suppliers, it basically is the ground, the earth, the rain, the sun. All those elements that were waiting for us when we were born. And when we talk about dependency, you have to admit that we really are totally dependent on everything around us. Those who say, I am independent, are nuts. They're nuts. They really are not. Nobody is. Nobody is. We thank God for the body. And then there is a custom about which I didn't know. And that is called the Simcha Beit HaShoava. Ever hear of it? Simcha Beit Shoeva. Yeah, withdrawing. Okay? What are you withdrawing?
You're withdrawing from the comforts of your own home.
No, you're
That's not an
withdrawing
ancient
something.
thing.
No, you're withdrawing something very specific.
Okay.
Critical to the celebration of Sukkot is that tradition, and we don't do it. We don't do it anymore. The Orthodox will do it in Israel. We draw from the water and pour out the water. What does that do?
You need water for planting. You must have, I think Israel is a desert, so they are very thankful for water.
You're right, you got it. We need water for rain. And the ceremony itself tells you how much rain God is going to supply for the coming year. It's also called Simcha HaMayim. And has anyone done it?
No.
Anyone heard of it?
No.
It is something lost, except to the Orthodox in Israel and the Orthodox in Rome. Pouring of the water. It is something, I think, at Tashleh you throw bread on water or chicken or, in olden days or whatever you had to throw on water to get rid of your sins. This is a completion of that repentance. You draw from the water and pour it on the earth, imitating God's gift of rain.
I was just thinking something from our old wonderful little blue
I knew
book
you
that
were.
fit in their pocket. And I wrote it down so I remember it.
Yeah, it did.
You said it every week.
Pocket.
You're right. The earth is Lord's and the fullness thereof, for he is established it upon, he is founded upon the sea and established it upon the flood.
Right.
Which I think is, when you think about it, it was a separation of the waters that time, and then that didn't work, so there was a flood, and then it was reestablished as land.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay.
And that there's a reason for the flood story.
Yeah.
Many reasons for the flood story. Huh?
I just studied for Parshat Noach in Torah.
Oh, you did?
Last week, yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can you tell me who was wiped out in that generation of the flood?
According to whom?
According to tradition.
According to Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
As far as I know, with the exception of this man and his unnamed wife and his 3 sons, and I don't know anything beyond that.
You'll see.
Okay.
Okay. As precise. Really did procreate. Filled up humanity. Now, here's a description, biblical description, of the way Sukkot was celebrated in the temple, in Jerusalem, in the early days, the heydays of Sukkot. In the brilliantly illuminated court of the women. See, there was a court of the priests, the high priest being at the temple, the Levites being a few steps down. They were the schleppers of the priesthood and the basic Israelites. And there was also a court for women. They generally were not allowed on the precincts of the Levites or the Kohanim. Sounds like a pizza? It is. The court of the women, which had a double gallery of some kind, that the priests and the Levites, generally the Levites, priest didn't bother with hard labor, they did a Torah dance. They took a Torah dance reciting hymns of praise. Generally, the hymns from Psalm 120 to 140. And they would dance around with the Torah and sing hymns of praise. There would be musicians accompanying the priests in the singing. It would be celebrated all night, from early evening till sunrise. And then the priests would go to the well of Nicanor, the gate of Nicanor, which was one of the gates of ancient Jerusalem. It's chilling in here, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll go tell Tom.
What are you going to do?
Tell Tom
Okay.
that he's freezing.
All right.
Thank you.
And they would go there and they draw water. Showing up. They would draw water for rain. That was all part of the Sukkot celebration.
That was off the Temple Mount, in other words.
Yeah.
Is that possibly Bethesda, the pool of Bethesda that's within the walls
Could have
of the
been.
old city?
They draw it and then they dump it into the Kidron Valley, which is, if you've been to Jerusalem, you know the Kidron is right below the Temple Mount, runs along that fault line. Following the ceremony, according to the archaeologists, the worshipers would make their way into the temple's outer courtyard, where they would continue after staying up all night to sing and dance and sing praises.
Hallel. Hallel.
Huh?
Hallel hymns.
Hallel. You know, it's funny, I was talking to some non-Jews the other day, and they said to me, how come we don't have any Hebrew in our service?
In the what?
I said, you do all the time. And they said, give us one word.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Oh, they say it.
I know, but it's.
They correct it.
Comes from a.
Amen, right? So may it be. Hallelujah. It's combined of two words. Hallel, to praise, and Yah, the name of God. Yah is the name of God. That was, it is thought, what the high priest would say in the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement, the ineffable name. Hallelujah. That may have been it. You know, Yahweh is an invention. We make names up so we don't say the name of God. For example, when you go to the wall and they're praying, or when a Orthodox Jew, I worked for Rabbi Julius Nodell for 2 years. I was his gopher. And his father came to invest in and to install him at the temple of which I was working in St. Louis. And he was a disciple of Abihilo Silva. Okay. And he would tell me his sermons would go anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes. And he would tell me that Abihilo Silva never spoke less than 55 minutes. And he copied me. He really did. I did hear Abihilo Silva in 1951 at the now defunct Edgewater Beach Hotel at a CCAR convention, which is a famous convention because Rabbi Frazin from Detroit recommended that we cut out Bacharbonu from the Torah blessings because it insulted the non-Jews, who has chosen us from among all people. Wanted to cut it out of the UPB. Yeah, it's like the rabbi who boarded up the ark at Sinai. You know, who thought it was too Jewish.
You're probably not.
And that's true. That's true. He boarded up the ark. So it wouldn't even be there. Now, Sandy and I grew up in a Reformed temple. And the ark was on the eastern wall. And it was the center of the pulpit. So, you know, we're familiar with the holiness of the ark. Did you do anything?
The office just called him, I couldn't find him in the building.
Well, he's not here.
I think
He's
there's something
here.
wrong with the computer.
And no,
Okay.
He's here, it just wasn't where I usually find him.
What?
there's no control over the computer that's running.
You're kidding.
Computer's down. The computer's down. It's programmed.
Yes,
No thermostats?
It's all on
What are those on
computer.
the wall?
It's all on computer.
They're there for you to think
They're what?
you're, they're for you to think you're
so
doing.
I think it reads it and sends it to the computer.
They're phony.
There- He has opened
In
it
other
up.
words, they're phony.
He has, I have seen him adjust it, so I
Okay.
think we're not getting all the stuff.
He's been alerted.
We'll
So the
survive.
best.
The last 6 days or something, the computer's down.
Right.
Okay. All right. It's still customary for some Jews. Now, I don't know how many of you or me build sukkah. Number one, I don't have a backyard anymore. I have a balcony. And really, it's much too small to build a sukkah. Even a portable one that you can buy at Roosevelt or at Hamakor. Pardon me?
We're online.
Yeah, you can get them online
Oh,
as
yes.
well.
Oh,
You
yes.
can get everything online. You know, you name it, you can get everything online. You know, and if you go online, you can even get a wife.
That's an old thing.
Yeah.
J-Day.
Singles.com.
J-Days,
Huh?
J-Days,
JJ.
J-Days.
J-Day, right. That's how my daughter found her Israeli boyfriend, on J-Day. Now she lives in Israel.
Yeah, she made Aliyah.
Hmm?
I know that she made that.
She made Aliyah.
I didn't know why she moved. Now we know why, the rest of the story.
Huh?
We couldn't figure out why she would make Aliyah, but now we know the rest of the story.
Yeah, and she's still working for Columbia
I made Aliyah.
University too.
Well,
I was
Right.
50 years old.
because he has this, yes, she
I
has
didn't
a
even
sick
have a
mother.
daddy who was a
and-
rabbi.
Well, you know,
The motivation for doing that is so, it's as personal as almost.
she went through hoops to get the immigration papers. Really went through hoops. Okay, now all three of these holidays were later invested with religious significance and historical significance. Okay? Can you tell me what?
We got away from the land for one reason, and we transferred our allegiance from fields to the temple in Jerusalem. Rabbi Guderres often talked about holidays having 3 layers.
Right.
Basic one being agricultural. And I think maybe perhaps the division of labor resulted in a sort of mini industrial revolution for the Jews.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the Jews in Jerusalem didn't farm the land. You know, they were the upper elite society, you know, living in New Hampton. No, all three were later connected. They were originally separate. You got the Passover, we'll see that too. Separate holidays, but all three became interconnected with one historical religious event. What?
Exile? Babylonian exile?
No, Babylonian?
Jews.
Greek,
No. No.
Syrian.
The Exodus.
Oh, that's right. Let me say that.
Living in the desert.
The Exodus from Egypt. What did we dwell in when we were in the desert? We dwelled in booths, most likely tents, but we dwelled in booths during the Exodus. God provided us with oases from which we could take branches so that we could erect booths to shield us from the sun. All three. Now, I realized that. I came to that realization in the shower 2 weeks ago. That all three are connected to the Exodus. Passover, of course, we know the immediate connection of that. And Shavuot. What does Shavuot celebrate?
Receiving of
Receiving
the
of
Torah.
the Torah.
The giving of the Torah. Where?
Mount Sinai.
In the Sinai Peninsula. When? When?
During the Exodus.
Huh?
During the Exodus.
40 days after they left Israel. Egypt. 40 days after we left. All three. We dwelt in booths in the desert. On Passover celebrates the Passover, the sacrifice of the Paschal Lamb, from which Christianity theology emanates. Why did it have to be a Jewish deal? Everything in there? Okay. In the Bible it says, all citizens of Israel shall live in the booths in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. Now, obviously, Sukkot had no relationship whatsoever to the Exodus in the beginning. It was a Thanksgiving festival for the harvest of land. They even celebrated it when there was a drought, and that was not infrequent in the ancient land of Israel. But somehow, some way, Jews, being Jews, had to make something historical and religious out of it. Religious in that God had the angel of death pass over the house of the Jews, which tied in the Paschal Lamb sacrifice. And historical because the Exodus took place maybe, let's see, 4,400 years ago, 3,400 years ago. So all three are tied in, yes.
I just read an article that says that they can't find any archaeological evidence that there was ever an exodus of that amount of people.
That there was never.
Right.
Well, there was a nomadic tribe called the Hebrews. And the Hebrews, which is close to Hebrews, went down into Egypt and dwelled in parts of Egypt, maybe not the land of Goshen, which is the most fertile part of Egypt, but went down into Egypt and became very strong, very powerful. And later on, when the native Egyptian people became strong enough to oppose them, the nomadic tribe moved out. Now, whether they were the original Hebrews, I don't know. And nobody has really definitively suggested that they are. But the proximity to the Exodus is real. Now, there happen to be several places in Egypt, one of which is a wadi, a depression, in the earth called Wadi Yusuf, for Joseph. And archaeologists have found that. And the name Joseph is not an Egyptian name. Moses is. Joseph is not. And so therefore, they determined there were some people named Joseph. Now, during the Habiru takeover of Egypt, there was a foreign prime minister, something like the Fed chairman, who, rationed out the food to the people during a famine, during a drought. And he became very powerful, perhaps more so than Pharaoh. The statement in Torah that says, and there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, who may have been the administrator under the previous Pharaoh, is indicative of an increasing Egyptian nationalism, where they declared their independence from this nomadic tribe reign. Now, it's all conjecture, but it's all a possibility. Conjecture leads to possibility. So, not only do we contemplate our gratitude for Sukkot, we also tie it into a historical tradition. Okay? And of course, as Sandy mentioned, Pitzin is a very important factor of Sukkot, which basically most of us don't practice, or none of us practice, and that is welcoming guests. Now, nomadic tradition has that when a guest comes into your tent, you can't kill him. And so therefore, you've got to be hospitable. So you take care of him, you feed him, even if he's an enemy. Yeah. You've got to understand the Hatfield and McCoys were not the first tribal enemies. We had lots of that throughout history. What's going on in the Middle East now is tribal warfare. And it harkens back to 3,000 years ago. It's tragic. We're to welcome guests. Invite people, no. So, I might invite Irwin, but I know him. So you're not invited. Okay? The Hotchners, but I know him, so they're not invited. John, I know her. She's not invited. All right. Sandy, I've known too long. No, I'm not complaining about knowing Sandy. I'm complaining about the years that have passed.
Yeah.
Don't complain about it, be happy.
Pardon me?
Don't complain, be happy, it's a lot of years.
It is a lot of years. It really is. Now, the holiday lasts for 7 days. And 7 also, as I mentioned before, refers to the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca. Leah, she came first. I put her first, and Rachel. Rachel's a latecomer, but she gave birth to the people of Israel. See, it was Benjamin who occupied the territory of Jerusalem. And Joseph, who saved the Jewish people from disaster, the famine of Canaan.
I'm never afraid to be wrong, so, because that's how you learn. I'm never. Is not the welcoming of the stranger tied to when Abraham welcomed the stranger into his tent.
Yeah.
Who did that, and so that when we welcome the stranger, the blessing is in the name of Abraham and Sarah. Is that right, or is that?
Right, that's right. You're right. You're right, Sandy. You're right.
That's nice.
Yes.
What's the significance of 40? There's so many, 40 days.
We have magical numbers. You know, numerology played a part in ancient Israel.
I just want how they got.
One is a magical number. It's a prime, okay?
Kabbalah is based on that, isn't it?
What?
Kabbalah is based a lot on numerology.
Oh, yeah, Kabbalah is all tied in with numerology and astrology. 7 is a magic number. 3 is a magic number. 3 patriarch. You know,
What about 40?
Fammi Odeo. We don't go to 40.
Oh, 40 is also 40 years.
40 years in the wilderness.
40 days and
But
40
why
nights.
did they pick 40? Why couldn't it have been 35?
Because.
Because what? You don't use.
For that, I have no answer.
Okay. That's
Okay.
fine.
In Hebrew,
And
they
then
do
you
that.
always
40 days of the flood,
And,
you know, of the downpours and tornadoes, yes.
About numbers. Since one's the first magical number, the lowest magical number in magical numbers,
Right?
all right, and then you said 7 and then you said 3. So in number, if you add 7 and 3, you get 10. Then if you take 1 plus 0, it's 1. So the magical numbers in the middle go back to the one from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's new.
No, I read that. I didn't.
Oh, you read that, but it's new to me.
Okay, then I made it up.
Yeah, no, you didn't make it up. Okay, then 12. 12 tribes of Israel. Now, I'm not too sure where the number 12 comes from. What's the magical reason for 12?
3 goes into it 4 times.
3 goes into it 4 times. Oh, you multiply by 3. By 4.
And 2
Okay.
plus 1 equals 3.
Huh?
2 plus 1 equals 3. And
2
you're
plus
talking about
1
3.
equals 3, which comes to 12.
Let's
go on.
The number 10 for minion. 10, the number 10
For a minion.
for minion.
10.
Yeah.
10 is only used for a minion. I don't know what other religious significance it has. Okay, what is added to a prayer service, a traditional prayer service, and during Sukkot? You have the Musaf service, the 4th service. Yeah, that's what we call our, what time is it, Fred?
11.
Okay. That's what we call the extra service. We have something like that on Yom Kippur. There was a Musaf service in the UPB, an extra service, where we sit for 2 hours listening to a recitation of historical fiction or fact. All right, and then lastly, we celebrate the holiday by circling 7 times, circling the temple 7 times, or this is what they did in the courtyard, okay? Carrying the lulav and the etrog and reciting songs of praise. They also, many communities blow the shofar after that, signaling God's final judgment. You think the final judgment is Yom Kippur? Sukkot is the final judgment. And it's very appropriate why it's the final judgment.
You don't eat, you die.
You got it? If God does not provide, you die. If the earth is not abundant, you die. All right? Now, you didn't ask me about what about the other holidays.
off the track question. Yom Kippur can also be read as Yom Kippurim. The connection between Yom Kippur and Purim.
Right.
Okay,
I don't see where they're connected.
and you know, I don't
I mean, they're totally dissimilar holidays.
either. Right.
Sounds
You
good.
know, Purim is Bacchanalia,
Yeah.
you know, and Yom Kippur is anything but. Okay, but there are two holidays that we pay very little attention to after Sukkot. Sukkot lasts how many days? 7. Okay, the 8th day is what? What? Shemini Atzeret. It's a separate holiday. It is not originally part of Sukkot. And you're supposed to eat in the Sukkah on Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day, which is literally the meeting. Okay? You're supposed to eat there, but you don't celebrate Sukkot. You don't wave the lulav and the etrog, and you don't march around, but you sing. We're big on singing. All right? That's why we have 2 cantons. All right?
That's why we get 8 cans.
What are you laughing about?
7 cans.
What was the aside? That was so funny.
What's yours?
That's why we have 2 cantons. That's why, no, we're big on singing. Don't forget the service was sung. The Torah portion was sung. What is singing? Now, I'm sure that if we went back 2,500 years to the days of the temple, we would not recognize their form of la la la.
You have to remember, things weren't written. It's easier to remember things with a.
Oh, it's much easier to put a melody to it.
Yes.
Yeah, much easier. I just saw a movie like that.
Die, die, die.
Huh?
Die, 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 die,
Die, die, die, ya, 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 the name of God, you know. But the la la la's,
Too many.
no, I don't think so, maybe.
Yeah. It's good for
Maybe.
kids.
And then there's another holiday that follows. What is the other holiday that follows?
You forgot to say we also do Yisker.
Huh?
At the end, we say Yisker. There's a Yisker.
Uh-huh, at the end, it's a Yisker service. Any temple you know that has a Yisker service? Huh?
Yeah, all the festivals contain Yisroel.
When do we have a Yisker service here?
We know, Rabbi Kadar does.
On Yom Kippur.
We're in Yom Kippur, we do say Yisroel during the Shavuot.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you say Kaddish. Kaddish, there's not a service dedicated to memory
Right.
called Yisker. You're supposed to have one. Okay?
Rabbi Kadar doesn't believe in this. She thinks it's too depressing.
What?
Rabbi Kadar doesn't believe in practicing Yisker in all of the holidays.
It's depressing.
Neither did Rabbi Shapiro. We never had a separate Yisroel service except, you know, as part of the memorial service of Yom Kippur. Am I right, Max? We never had it.
She just
You
likes to talk.
have to,
She just
because
likes to
then
talk.
all the people leave. Right after Yisker,
You never-
all the people leave.
You weren't there with
for
me.
the
I
break
appreciate
fast.
this. One time, it was after Yisroel on Yom Kippur in a whole place, and about to go into the afternoon service, and we were going to start it with the Hasidic Kaddish. Corey starts his first note
Yeah.
and looks out and sees all the people leaving, and he stopped dead, and as only Corey could do, it said, "I'll wait."
Wow.
It was
Only Corey
awesome.
could get away with that.
Only Corey.
Only Corey could
This
get
was a
away
little
with that.
Corey, and this was
But the concluding service is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is
Yeah.
beautiful. All right, you're supposed to eat outside on Shemini Atzeret al fresco, if you will. Okay. Savoring the breeze in the cool wind, unless you live in Alaska or northern Nebraska or the Dakotas with their snowfall. You don't recite the blessings for Sukkot. Then there is one other holiday. One other holiday, you know.
Simchat Torah.
Right. Simchat Torah is a separate holiday also. It is not all tied into one. We think of it as being all one.
But that's not a festival, right?
That's the reading of the Torah.
Yeah, but it's not a
That's the beginning, that's the conclusion and beginning of the Torah. Now, I found an interesting comment. What do we read in Simchat Torah?
Beginning, the end of the beginning of it.
Okay, why Bereshit? Why the beginning?
Because it's the beginning of the new year. There are, there are more than one new year.
Found a very interesting commentary on that, which is Midrash. Okay. Bereshit is not all bliss and joy. Sure, the creation of human life is wondrous. The garden in which Adam and Eve lived is wondrous. We all wish we lived in such a garden, all right? But then they have children. We all know about that. Then they have children. They have 2 sons, right?
3.
Not yet, not yet. That's after the murder. That's after the murder. Okay. They have 2 sons, Cain and Abel. We know the story of Cain and Abel. I won't recite it again. But here is a midrash. The human story of Cain's murder of his brother Abel. Cain's sins seems only to grow, to expand from the violent rage he felt in jealousy to the genuine cruelty of murdering his brothers. And we hear God's haunting question. The question is, where is Abel, your brother? To this, Cain spits back, what? Am I my brother's keeper? And God's answer? Silence. Silence. In other words, we have to answer for Cain. We supply our own answer to the question, where is your brother? Am I my brother's keeper? And the Midrash goes on to say, of course you are your brother's keeper. The hateful rejection, because we're all related. I've done these genealogy studies, of which I've told you too much, over the past years. You know, and there is only one starting part around the country of Djibouti in East Africa. All of this traces the entire human family from that one country, which then tells us all that we are our brother's keeper.
Which country?
Djibouti.
It's
D-I-J-O-U-B-I.
Supposed to be
leaky with the,
southern
is that where it is with the?
Southeastern Africa.
I heard the newest theory is that it's South Africa, where theoretically, yeah.
Genetically, it's one mother.
What?
Genetically, from one mother.
Yeah. Yeah. The original Eve. All right? The fundamental principle here is, yeah, you're your brother's keeper. And you'd better remember that. Now, interestingly enough, it goes on to say, instead, the unanswered question allows a subtler response to unfold. At the close of Cain's story, the Torah recounts the generations between Adam and Noah. And if you read that portion, you'll be bored to tears like all of us are. Adam and Eve beget another son, Seth. Right. So they have 3 sons. Seth in turn begets Enosh, who begets Canaan, who begets Mahalalel, who begets Jared, who begets Hanuk, who begets Methuselah, who begets Noah, from whom, as the survivors of the flood, we are descended. The Cain chain is wiped out. Remember I asked a question? Cain's chain of famine is wiped out, and all his descendants. So it becomes a generational responsibility for us to be our brother's keeper, or we will destroy each other. Yes?
Referring to things changing.
Pardon me?
Talking about things changing, after Seth begets his son, isn't there a change in how God is referred to? There's something that says God is now acknowledged in a different kind of way after the birth of Seth's son.
I'm not familiar with that.
I think so.
Could you check and tell us next week?
Absolutely.
Good, thank you. Okay. See, there was a debate among the Torah scholars, Akiva, and what did Akiva say the highest commandment is? As yourself. Right. Okay. So after the flood, human history starts again, which teaches us historically that there is a fundamental relationship between all of us. And we have to recognize it. And we've done a lousy job. We really have. Okay, next week, Pesach and Shavuot. Okay, I'll try and squeeze it. We all know a lot about Pesach. I'll look for what we don't. Okay, yes?
Okay, are you doing 2 lectures?
Only 2. That's why I'm going to squeeze them both in next week. But Sukkot really is a major holiday that is really practiced in minor reform, minor tone, minor key. It should, did they go to Sukkot here?
Yes.
Where?
We have one in the courtyard, and then the sanctuary is turned into a virtual Sukkah.
Yeah, like we used
Yeah, actually,
to. What?
it's much more aesthetic.
Well, yeah. Okay, they're a more affluent congregation.
Yeah.
Yeah. We built it on the pulpit,
Uh-huh.
right above the lectern.
Yeah.
Right, remember that one? Yeah,
I had one in my, when I lived in Jerusalem.
yeah.
My apartment, you walked in on this level, but it was actually down, and so your test was floor level, covered over by iron bars to keep out the bad guys. So for Sukkot, there was something shot right in the courtyard where I lived. Well, they put up a bunch of those things, and then I hung fruit, and then every bee in the Middle East came to my Sukkah.
Yeah, I'm the wrong fruit.
Well, what they said, what I was told by my neighbor, that, you should put paper, because that will keep away the bees. And I looked in the.
Paper where?
It's paper fruit. Paper fruit.
Oh, you're supposed to string fruits and
I know what you're
popcorn.
supposed to do, but my neighbor said, don't have fruit, green.
I'll tell you a story about mine. Fred, turn it off. Okay, tell you a story.